This tent is so good that you can't even buy it. The Durston X-Mid 2 tent has been flying off the shelves for the last 2 years now, but inventory is expected to stabilize going into 2022. But let's look at what's good about this tent, what's bad about it, and see if the hype is warranted and whether it's worth trying to snag one. Starting off with the good things about the Durston X-Mid 2 tent, the pitch is one of the biggest benefits of this. It only uses 4 stakes in order to go up, which is a lot less than a lot of other tents. Most tents will use anywhere from 6 to up to 12 stakes. Another big benefit of the pitch is that the inner and the fly are attached. So if it's raining out and you're putting your tent up, you're gonna have the fly covering the inner tent as it goes up. For those of you who have used tents where you have to pitch the inner tent and then put the fly over top, you know how much of a pain that is if it's raining. Another benefit has to do with the material that the X-Mid is made of. So it's made with a sil polyester material and it has a few benefits. First up, it absorbs a lot less moisture than comparable sil nylon tents. Another benefit is that it's more UV resistant. And then the third benefit is that it doesn't sag when it's wet. My favorite of all those 3 benefits of sil polyester is that it doesn't absorb as much moisture. So if it has been raining, when you pack your tent up, you're not gonna be carrying as much water weight on your back for the rest of your trip. As you can see by the shape of the tent, it has a little bit of a unique structure. And the structure has a couple benefits. First up is how it deals with weather. This tent with its steeper sidewalls is gonna shed snow and wind very, very well. I've had this tent out during snowfalls and it's worked phenomenally. You don't have any snow kind of settling on top of a tent and causing undue load on the pole structure. And because of the steeper angled walls, it just reflects the wind away from the tent very well. Another benefit of that structure is the size and space of the tent. So you get 2 really big vestibules with the tent. I can fit my pack easily underneath it as well as some shoes. And the width of the tent is really nice as well. It has a bit of a bigger footprint compared to some other tents out there, so it may be difficult to fit into smaller tent pad spaces, but it'll fit in any traditional kind of 10 by 10 tent pad, no problem. And once we get inside the tent, that extra space is really noticeable. I can fit 2 wide 25-inch pads in here very comfortably, and that's really rare for a 2-person tent. Most 2-person tents can only fit 2 small pads in there and it gets really, really tight. They're more like 1.5-person tents. It's also quite long. If you're 6'4", up to 6'4", I think you're gonna be very comfortable in this tent. I'm 5'10" and have tons of room in here. And when you take in the amount of extra space I have at my head and foot, then I think 6'4" is gonna be comfortable. You could probably push that up to 6'7" if you're using it by yourself, or even more if you're laying on an angle. Once we open up this door, which is actually really nice because the zippers work very well, and once you fully unzip it, the door just kind of hangs and it doesn't flop into the ground. If it's muddy, you know how much of a pain that is, so really nice door. And then on the inside, there's a lot of little details and features that make this tent very nice. It has 4 pockets, 2 at each end, which is really good for storing things. It has little loops at the top, and you can run a line through that to make a ridge line to dry things or just hang things if you want to. And then there's some other features on the outside which just make this tent really, really nice. The doors roll up really nicely with these little cinches. There's 2 vents, one on either side, which allows you to just open the tent up and get a little bit of a cross draft in there. Even with the 2 vents, you could have condensation issues if it's very cold out or you're in a very humid environment. What you do have here is a double wall tent. And while double wall tents don't reduce condensation, they do protect everything that's inside of the tent from the condensation that accumulates on the inside of the fly. Once you take the tent down and pack it up, it packs down really small. It's another benefit of sil poly. This tent is nice and compact if that's a concern for you. The weight is another big benefit of this tent. It weighs 1,025 grams. And because you're using your trekking poles, which you'd have with you anyways, you don't need to bring any extra poles, and that saves you a lot of weight with the tent. The last benefit is its price. This tent costs only $300 US when you can get it. There's a lot of scalpers out there who are taking advantage of the fact that this tent is a little bit hard to get right now. But at $300, this tent is very affordable and much less than a lot of other high-end quality tents. Now let's get into some of the negatives about the X-Mid. First up is you need really good stakes, especially if you're in bad ground. I'm in really easy ground to put stakes in, really nice firm soil. But even then, I'm using full ground MSR groundhog stakes, which are really big stakes. And that's so that as I put the poles up in the middle of the tent, they're not pulling the stakes out of the ground. You have a really steep angle from some of the stakes to the pole, and for that reason, especially at the ends that are closest to the pole, you need to use some really good stakes. Another negative is that the guy lines that come with the tent are really short, and that can make it frustrating when setting up the tent. I'm gonna add 2-foot long guy lines, and what that's gonna help with is when I'm in areas where it's a little bit more uneven ground, then I can lengthen the guy line out for the end that's a little bit lower and tighten the guy line for the end that's a little bit higher, and that's gonna allow for a better pitch. The asymmetrical design of the tent can also be a negative if you have 2 people in there and you want them to be sleeping head to head. It's only really a problem if both people are really tall, like over 6 feet tall. What's gonna happen then is one person, if they're on the end with the more gradual slope, they're gonna have their face a little bit closer to mesh. It's not a huge problem, but is just a little bit more annoying if you are on that end. Me and my girlfriend, we use this tent a whole bunch. She actually loves this tent. It's her favorite tent that we have now. But she sleeps on the end that does have the mesh a little bit shallower, but she sleeps with her feet a little bit closer to the other end, and it's no problem. We're both super comfortable in the tent. We already talked about the large footprint of the tent. That can be a problem for some spots, especially if you're random camping like I was last night. It was a little bit tough to fit the tent into the spot that I chose. Another negative is the stuff sack. It hasn't ripped on me yet, but I've heard for a lot of people the stuff sack fails pretty quickly as you're trying to stuff the tent into it. So I'll probably replace this with another stuff sack down the road. And then finally, the elephant in the room, the tent is just hard to get sometimes. I've heard that inventory is supposed to stabilize around 2022, and hopefully that happens because I think this is an awesome tent. It's affordable, lightweight, and for those of you who aren't used to trekking pole tents, I think it's still gonna feel familiar and useful for you while you're out on the trail. And because of all those benefits, this tent gets a Gear Priority Top Pick Award. Go check out a video post right up in the corner there. It's a trip where I go ultra comfort. I bring a whole bunch of different ultra comfort gear items and go over tips in order so that you can be as comfortable as you possibly can while out on the trail.